You're very welcome along. It's 2023, but all of the problems of the world remain, particularly if you are the House of Representatives and you want to elect a speaker. What's going to happen in the US this year? How many problems does Donald Trump have? Is Joe Biden going to run again? And dear old Blighty as well. We're going to have to give a little bit of a mention to Rishi Sunak and his Conservatives' agenda for 2023. As ever, it's Johnny Ward here, joined by Paul Krishnamurty and William Kedjanyi. William, how are you?
A happy new year to everybody watching and listening, and I'm very well, thank you.
Paul, your hopes for 2023 in a political front?
Hi, Johnny. Happy New Year. Hopes are that the Freedom Caucus, the far-right Freedom Caucus, don't blow up the world economy. That would be my number one hope, as I think is their plan. And I hope that we get, I'm dreaming, but I'm hoping that we get another Tory leadership contest because they're all such great betting heats. And also I'm hoping that the several overseas elections that we have this year are exciting, at least, you know, for example, Erdogan in Turkey. That would be fantastic if that were a genuinely close election.
How relieved were you with the way the midterm elections went in November?
Oh, unbelievably relieved. It's an absolutely brilliant result, the Democrats, for Biden. Okay, more to the point, actually. Let's not put it that way. It's a terrible, terrible result for the Republicans. And when you dig into the actual data of what happened, the really worrying thing for them is that the Democrat vote didn't really turn out as one might have expected in the midterms. You know, the whole theory behind the Republican, the red wave, was that midterm, the incumbency party doesn't get its voters out as well, especially when it's the Democrats and their voters are much younger, much less likely to be registered, etc. And that did materialise, and yet the Republicans still didn't really win, you know, and they went backwards in the Senate. And that I can only see is because at least faction of independent-minded, relatively moderate conservatives reject fascism, reject Trumpism, okay? And the fact that, you know, as much as Cheney might be persona non grata in the Republican Party for daring to chair the January 6th committee, there's enough of a faction of conservative-minded people who know what that was a coup, and they are prepared to vote Democrat in that scenario. And moving forward, I mean, you have to think with everything that's happening this week, the chaos, the Republicans appearing completely unable to govern, their most extreme, most insane candidates front and centre. You have to think that the Democrats are very well placed for 2024, and there's probably a bit of value there.
Yeah, and William, Donald Trump is effectively, if he hasn't already, he's well on the way to destroying the Republican Party over time. And you have a staggering situation now, William, where Fox News is effectively being sued for peddling the lie that the election was rigged.
Yes, indeed. Those lawsuits, and there are quite a few of them, by the company that gives election software for voting machines, will be one of many keeping an eye on. Political bettors this year are going to have to do lots of legal work because there are multiple really serious cases. The verdicts of any one of which could materially change the election, and that's one of my things to watch this year, at least as far as America goes. Just regarding the Republicans, as we currently are speaking, there is a 7th vote for the Speaker of the House to be elected, and we are in literally a Groundhog Day situation, where for the House to be sworn in, a Speaker needs to be elected. There's a majority of Republicans, just about, enough to elect a Speaker if they get 218 votes, I believe, but 20 of them have gone against Kevin McCarthy, the man that, for now, the GOP establishment, I think, are still trying to get over the line. But however, every single time he runs, he loses. The House turns, they come back the next day and they do it again. We are on vote 7 for McCarthy essentially to lose. So by the time you watch this, we probably still won't have a Speaker of the House. We probably won't have a sworn-in Congress. So how that situation develops, I'm proudly saying I don't know, because it's not happened really in my lifetime. But yeah, that party's now getting the sort of split pressures that plenty of other similar parties had to deal with, and it's really basically stopping it from functioning properly, an effect on the presidential primary, the presidential run down the line.
This is a staggering state of affairs, Paul.
It is. But it's only the latest staggering state of affairs in what is as I on about endlessly, and I don't care if people want to call it a conspiracy theory, they're wrong. This is part of the world war that's been going on for 9 years. There was a lot of media commentators out there trying to present what's going on in Congress as a personality contest. They don't like Kevin McCarthy. Just replace moderate, find a compromise candidate. This isn't going to happen. The Freedom Caucus, the far right of the Republican Party, including incredibly dubious candidates like Lauren Boebert, formerly of Explore Talent Agency, are trying to crash the dollar. That's what they're doing, right? This is followed at Dave Troy on Twitter, who has called all of this, from Elon Musk wrecking Twitter, going back to 2017 about the Russian oligarch money pouring into American healthcare, and et cetera, right? And understanding what the agenda of the Russian elite was. What is happening right now is Freedom Caucus, the right wing in America, are trying to crash the dollar. They want to ensure that America defaults on the debt. If they don't raise the debt ceiling, it will be forced to default on the debt from last year. There will be up to what is estimated a $15 trillion economic crash here, right? So more than 3 times the scale of COVID. Okay, and I don't believe that they will back down. So I guess what this will boil down to in the end, it sounds ridiculous, but in the long term, I think the Democrats are going to have to elect McCarthy. They are going to have to, if 20 of them sit on their hands, vote present, then McCarthy can become Speaker, and it will isolate the Republic. It will isolate the Freedom Caucus. What it says about, and I think that is what will happen, because I don't think that either the sort of sensible majority in the Republican Party or the Democrats are going to allow this clear attack by Putin and the BRICS countries on American democracy to succeed. But what that means for the Republican Party going forward, where you would have a speaker in place who was effectively put there by the Democrats, that's civil war time for the Republican parties, and I've no idea where that ends up.
How are we right at this state of affairs, William?
Some of the causes are pretty simple. A naked grab for just winning at any cost without thinking of long-term consequences, which, to be fair, is a story you can tell in various different democracies. Others, various amounts of just skullduggery and money grabbing. Definitely, I think foreign influence. I think also, and I'm not trying to be I'm not trying to Johan Hari on all this, but I think the age of the internet, I think, has had lots of consequences for politics, just in the sense that, lies are so much easier to spread, and it's so much easier to travel. And I think we've seen political polarization as well, not just due to that, but also due to falling living standards as well. So you have people who are, in short, a lot angrier, a lot more open to sort of more radical options, and people who are sort of a lot more vulnerable to falling into the trap or whatever, voting for really extreme candidates, particularly in a country where a lot of races will go blue or red. So you win the internal battle, you're suddenly tens on or whatever to take this seat in the House or this Senate or this governorship. or whatever, particularly with gerrymandering, which made that problem just exponentially worse. So, yeah, a fractured and you could say very flawed political system has led us to where we are with the Republican Party having moved so far over to the right that I think many people would remember. And also, I think being in a situation where they're ungovernable because the vast majority of Republican voters, I think tomorrow, it wouldn't be similar to like the past election, but I'd say probably over 50% tomorrow would vote for Trump or whatever. If you put him in a big field of Republican candidates. And it's really difficult when you've got a party leadership that ostensibly is just trying to move away from that, but a party faithful which is still wedded to the idea that he's the guy.
Yeah, and just on that, Paul, so to paraphrase Walter and the Big Lebowski, say what you like about conservative politics, but at least it's an ethos, and the old conservative politics, whether you agree with it or not, I guess you, to some extent, you knew what you were getting here. But America was on the verge of embracing fascism here.
Absolutely. It's on the verge of collapsing, I think. If these people gain power. I mean, just as an aside from this, I don't know if anyone noticed, Medvedev, the former Russian president, issued his New Year's predictions. I tweeted them and said, I'm happy to bet the other side of any of these. But he was talking about California and Texas splitting, break the end of the United States. This is a long-term agenda that's being played here. And regarding, just going back, she said, so, well, how did this come about? There's one thing that unites, but that crosses all of the issues affecting Western politics. It's not just America. It is we have left ourselves open and been flooded by foreign money, right? It's the same in Britain, where, something like 2% of British gas shares are owned by British institutions, right? And the hard cash in the world is owned by dictatorships, by oligarchies and dictatorships, whether it's the Gulf states. This is how the World Cup ends up in Qatar and Russia, right? And in particular in America with the Citizens United ruling, the political system has just been flooded with dark money. Britain has long been flooded with dark money, right? And thus the idea that we are, self-determining nations is just nonsense. It's absolutely for the birds, right? Our politics, our law, our economy, our media is owned by foreign oligarchic, anti-democratic powers. Until we get a grip on that, recognise it and do something about it, we're screwed, I think.
We're not going to solve it in this podcast, but in relation to Donald Trump, was 2022 the beginning of the end for him, Paul? You've been consistent in your message about this. You back Biden. We'll get to Biden and his future in the next few minutes, but he's got a rap sheet and a list of potentially, devastating criminal convictions, Donald Trump, that should have, basically broken him in half a long time ago. But it was at the beginning of the end. What happened in November?
Yes, it's all over for Trump. I'm absolutely confident of it. And I keep on laying him, and I still think the fact you can lay like 9 points in Norton Betfair, it's a great lay, it's free money. We've seen in this, in fact, that he doesn't even hold sway over the fanatics anymore. Party. The party wants to move on. And also, I mean, one thing I would say is that, let's say this standoff one way or another, whether what I was saying about the Democrats bailing McCarthy out or whatever, right? Who comes out well of this? Not Trump, who's been shown to be powerless, right? Not his followers, who look as crazy as ever. Ron DeSantis, he's got nothing to do with it. He's just sitting there in Florida, pushing this far-right agenda that clearly lots and lots of conservative voters want, winning that state comfortably. And I just think he's been like an absolute shoo-in. I really do not think Trump has a prayer. And if he does, he'll get obliterated by whoever the Democrat is.
And there's also probably a case to be made, William, that he's aging a bit, and people talk about Biden, but Trump's performances have probably regressed with time as well.
Yeah, I've seen it in his and I've made the point last year that it's clear that he does not or the crowd or a room or what he's saying, but there was a reason I think that cable news accepted the Trump sort of money hype train of going to raise or whatever. It was because he had not just sort of the continued side of being somebody running for power, then being somebody who had power, but also I think somebody who was just more captivating at that time. I don't mean that to excuse any of the things he said. It was just a better public speaker. I think I wouldn't necessarily be laying him at the moment. I wouldn't be there yet. But I think the momentum very much is gone, and it feels more naturally like the end of a political cycle for Trump rather than the middle or the beginning. Said, the Republican nomination race is something I'm still sort of sketching out. Ron DeSantis, I think, is a worthy favorite if you think Trump will go by the wayside. I couldn't really put you off him. I just don't know that he necessarily run. I also don't know how he himself might feel, the people around him might feel about going head to head with Trump, or even the possibility of Trump going and doing a third party thing to blow himself and Republicans up down the line, which I appreciate is a bit of a tangent. But long story short, if I was playing this, it's Biden. It's just simply a matter of how much you can get on before it's eventually confirmed and he goes to the price that he probably should have been after the midterm elections. You can get Bold along with Starr. I think it's a great bet. A Bold on. I think you will find worse 1 to 2 shots in almost every single sporting event every day of the week, and that's where I am on it. My view is if you're going long term, it'll be Biden versus who I don't yet know.
Biden versus who?
Think I know.
Yeah, but so Biden is 11-4, Paul. You've been consistently saying he was value, and he's actually, in fairness, he's emerging into 2023 in good shape. Will he run?
For both, really. I've gone for the nomination, average about 15 to 8. I'm on for the presidency, although I've cashed a lot of it out. I cashed out, it went to 3 to 1. But I think that he's, as Will says, I think he'll definitely be the nominee. And we're into probably a 50-50-ish contest, maybe 45-55, 40-60 by the outsider. However, the way things are going, that the Republicans making themselves unelectable, Biden racking up accomplishments, all over the place. While they're doing all this, he's opening new $2 billion bridge projects and stuff. I think that Biden's sitting very free. And also, the one thing about DeSantis is, look, this is all very good on paper in an aging right-wing Republican state, right, Florida. But he signed a very penal abortion law over there. Now, how does that play in the general election? Now, how does the rest of it play? I don't know. I certainly think that Biden is huge value at the moment.
The one thing, William, though, is Trump will probably dig up a load of dirt on him. But also, if Trump is sort of, kicked out of the conservative picture, there will be a bounce at the election. And that would be the worry if you're a Democrat, if you're a fan of, democracies, effectively, or if you want to vote the Democrats. If the Conservatives can get rid of Trump, they will have a bounce at the polls.
Yes, I appreciate that. Anybody but Trump, the general. Two things, however, in that situation. Number one, assuming he hasn't been legally kicked out of it, which I find difficult to call. I wouldn't want to lay Trump to run as a third-party candidate as a betting option. I think it's every chance he goes as a third-party candidate for all sorts of reasons, legal protections, cash cows, whatever. And also just his ego in general, because he's likely to be in complete denial about how bad things are really getting. That's always been the way with him. And secondly, assuming that we don't know necessarily what will decide the 24 election, it is still probably too far away. But even though Biden facing a different person from Trump is a tougher article sell, I think, and I've definitely evolved my thinking on this, I think Biden is more of an electoral force than he's been given credit for anyway. And his sort of history is much better than Hillary's was. I think it's much less easy to attack than hers was. And he's got genuine achievements he can point to and show. And also a number of the issues, at least for the last 6 months or so, has been trending in his favor due to actions taken by his administration. The economy, I don't think is doing amazingly, but it's definitely better than the worst outlooks predicted. So is energy. There's been support for what he's done with Ukraine. It's not been wholly supported. There's been a lot of pushback, but generally speaking, he has as much of the country with him as you could expect, given all the he's faced.
I just want to get you briefly on that, Paul, on Ukraine. It seems to be something of a stalemate. There were catastrophic Russian losses actually in recent days as well, and I was actually staggered to hear the figure of how many people, give or take, have died in the conflict so far. But it just seems to be, I don't know if you want to call it a stalemate or where it's going on the Russian side. How do you see it pan out?
I think that Russia will implode. I think Putin will implode. I think that the whole global network is imploding. And again, this all connects to everything that's happening. Obviously, being a international crime syndicate rather than a nation state, they have total disregard for human life, and it doesn't matter to them that they've lost 70,000 lives, whatever, right? I'm sure they will carry on. But I think that sooner or later, conditions in Russia are going to be just too horrific, and there will be a response. I think one of the other oligarchs or one of the other senior members of that crime syndicate, of that ex-KGB gang, will push him to one side. I just can't see that these people want to return to normality and their profits. They don't want potential revolutions. And Canada have started literally taking the money of sanctioned oligarchs to give to Ukraine. Right, it's only a matter of time before that starts happening across the West, before America do it and Europe. It's very clear Russia cannot win that war in a conventional way. So I thought it for a few months that any day now Putin could fall.
Yeah, it was actually fascinating to see him toasting the soldiers New Year's Day, and the awkward and pained expression of some of the soldiers. They just couldn't actually they couldn't even make it look real. We briefly, though, we're going to discuss Britain. William Kedjanyi. Fascinating time actually for politics in Britain in 2023. Another country that's having plenty of problems. Brexit is limping on. Keir Starmer obviously is a leader in waiting, I would have thought.
Yeah, he's the leader in waiting. I'd say also he looked it. I think his New Year's speech landed much better than Rishi Sunak's New Year's speech. He spoke today. They both spoke in Stratford. Sunak's gone for 5 pledges, basically, that basically stuff that he feels he can achieve before the end of the year, the next election. The thing is, even if he does all of that, and I doubt their actual achievements, I can't get too weedy until we don't have that much time left, but basically he said inflation, reducing NHS waiting times and stopping small boats. But the thing is, the inflation forecast is already set to reduce, so it's essentially a figures fix. There aren't any safe routes, so no fixing. I don't like it calling it a problem, it's a crisis. Regarding boats. And then with the NHS, I'm afraid, unfortunately, everything looks very broken at the moment. I believe Starmer to be the next Prime Minister in waiting. I think he probably gets there with a majority, but that's a long way away. The issue for Labour is they got the ball by the horns, and they've got to start imprinting themselves on the agenda. They need to agenda setters as well. There'll be time for them to do that still, but they cannot hope to just get in there off the back of Tory failure.
And you see the government launching an attack on the right to strike today, and a kind of a revolt against this. When you come back to Britain, Paul, and you travel the world a little bit, you spend time away. What's your feeling nowadays?
I think we're the UKSR, and I think that we are imploding. I think we've been for years. I think the country's deeply sick, and one of the illustrations of that deep sickness is that we won't acknowledge what is happening.
William here, and an apology is due because due to internet connection issues, we could not use the last minute and a half of this week's polling station. However, do stick with us. We'll work very hard on that technical glitch, and we'll be back with more top-class political betting analysis. Thanks very much for watching and subscribing to the Star Sports YouTube channel. Stay tuned because we have lots more to come, including great interviews, great shows, and of course, the best content we can create over the next 12 months. Thanks very much for your time this evening, and I'll be back with you next week.